Welcome to the Experience Darden podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'd like to share my recent conversation with Megha Kalyan. Megha is a second-year student in our full-time MBA class of 2026, and she and I recently connected to talk more about her background, her decision to pursue an MBA, what led her to Darden, her experience here at the Darden School of Business, and so much more. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. As always, if this conversation is helpful for you, please like this episode and subscribe to the Experience Darden podcast so you never miss an update. Remember, you can always check the episode description for links to Darden blogs, social channels, and more. And now, without further ado, here's my conversation with Megha Kalyan. Megha, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Great to be here, Brett.
It's great to talk with you. How's everything? How are you doing?
It's going well. I just finished with all my finals. Literally last night, clicked submit at 11:59. And now I'm ready to go on vacation. So I'm doing really well. How about you?
I think that's the ideal conditions for your podcast interview, to have all of that behind you. So now you can just focus only on the podcast. Great.
Yeah.
And then vacation, of course.
No, this was perfect timing.
Well, thanks for coming on the show. It's great to have you here. We always start with the same first questions. Tell us a little bit more about you. Who are you and what's your background?
Yeah. So I'm Megha. I'm currently a second year at Darden. I was Section C, and this summer I interned in Marsh McLennan in their Finance Leadership Development Program, and I'll be going back in the summer.
Well, that's awesome. Let's talk about Section C. We sometimes
Yeah.
get into this a little bit later, but you've introduced it here. So let's talk about Section
I
C.
have big Section C, C-suite pride. So it was an incredible experience. So during the first few quarters, the quarters 1 to 3, you're basically in your section. And so you're with them for every single class for the first couple months of Darden. So you really get to know the people in there. And I think for me, it was, they were such like an incredible bunch of people, very diverse, like coming from all different backgrounds. But also it was just a space where I could fail a lot because I came from a non-traditional background. But I think that section never made me feel like, oh, like Megha, you're embarrassing yourself, you know? And so that was a really special learning environment for me.
Yeah. What do you have a favorite norm? The sections have their own norms. I'm always curious to hear what people enjoyed about their section.
Yeah, that's a good question. I really liked our chant. Don't ask me to say it now because I definitely can't execute that well. But I would say like our section chant was really great. And just I think like within, this isn't exactly a norm, but like within the section, how like willing to reach out to random people everyone was. Like even if you hadn't spoken to someone in the section directly, like you felt like you could just reach out to them at any point if you had questions or you wanted to have a coffee chat. So we had a very like camaraderie focused culture, I would say.
I love that. How does the chant fit into the section experience? We have not talked about
Yeah.
chants much here on the podcast.
Yeah. So I don't know if this has come up a lot, but the sections are very much like Hogwarts houses. There's like a lot of pride, and every Friday, every Thursday, which is Darden Friday, you wear your section colors and you start off classes with this like chant, and it's really about like getting yourself really excited for the end of the week, and also just like taking a moment to come together as a section. Like during classes, like anything happens, people get cold called. But that's like a really nice time to energize and come back, I would say.
Yeah, I always, when I'm in the classroom building around 8 a.m. when class is
Oh
kicking
yeah.
off, you feel that boisterousness.
You can literally like feel it in the ground if you're like walking or if you're like up against the wall. So yeah, it gets spirited.
Well, tell us a little bit more about how you got interested in pursuing an MBA.
Yeah. So I had a very circuitous post college path, I would say. Definitely not the traditional applicant. When I was in college, I was pre-med. I really like thought I was going to go to med school and become a doctor. And like over the experiences that I had after college, I was kind of like, this is not the right path for me. And it just didn't represent like what I wanted for my future career and the kind of like work-life balance I wanted. So I took a job with Teach for America after college, and then that wasn't what I wanted also. I like only stuck out for a few months, maybe. It was a very trying experience for me. And then I actually worked in student affairs. So that was like my most recent job before coming to Darden. And so I worked at UVA in housing and residence life. Um, And that was kind of where I started to see that I had kind of some management potential. I had a bunch of students underneath me who I was supervising directly. And so I knew I had this like ability to understand people and understand how to motivate them, how to get them to work together on a particular project. And so I had the skill set. But I think what really drove me to the MBA, Brett, is because I like loved my job before coming to Darden. It was such a cool experience to be able to work with students, grow them, help them through really difficult situations that they were going. Because like the early 20s are definitely a time. So to be the person who is like able to help people who are struggling during that time was very special. Um, but like the thing that really drove me to come to MBA is like I was making $52,000 a year. And that was really hard because like I think once you come into adulthood, you want to be independent. It's like become very, very difficult with the cost of living. And also like the amount of money you make is very much like correlated to your perception. So not your value as a person, but your perception. And like within my family and sometimes in my friend group, I definitely felt like I'm really smart. Like, why am I not necessarily like getting the recognition that I deserve? And so that was part of it. I was like, I have a great skill set. I'm very talented. Like, how can I apply this in a way that is going to make me like very proud of my career as well? So I'm being very honest in this episode and like saying that like this is the thing. And, I think it's important to say that like money is a very important driver. And I don't think that that changes who I am as a person, but it was a big part of like pursuing the MBA experience because you can make impact in a lot of different kinds of roles.
That's true. And student affairs, obviously, very important work. You're right. You're working with people going through a very profound time in their life, whether you're working with college students or graduate students. Lots happening for people as they're going through school, and it can be challenging. It's not a 8 to 5 kind of job. It's can be even 24 hours a day. Phone can ring anytime. You may be on call, and I can understand how that would push you to say, like, you know what, I love what I'm doing, but I need more than this
Yeah.
in some different directions. So
Yeah. It was definitely time for a change.
for sure. So you mentioned you were working at UVA. So Darden was obviously known to you, but how did you get interested in Darden? What led you to Darden?
Oh yeah. So I think I have the unique experience of seeing UVA from a lot of different angles. I did my undergrad here, and then I worked here, and then I ended up coming to Darden. And I will say, like, even before getting into this story, is that like Darden is like the piece of my UVA journey that I look back on most fondly. Like this place has poured into me so much. And so it'll always be the most special part. But I guess like coming to how like I found Darden. So I was like kind of looking at an MBA or corporate roles, like how can I break into this new application of my skill set. And actually, like while I was working in HRL, we came to Darden like for one of our trainings. We ended up having it at the Forum Hotel, and so I was there, I was like in the gardens and everyone was talking. They were like, oh, like, yeah, like the business school is like over there. And it's like called Darden. And I was like, okay, well, I haven't really thought about it much, but then I kind of went home, did some research, and I found out that it's actually like really highly ranked or something. And so I started looking into it. And then that October, like the year like right before I applied, I came to, I think it's called DivCo, but it was like a women's admissions conference. And so I came here, really learned about Darden more formally. And that's, I would say, where I fell in love. I was like, if I go and get my MBA, I'm going to Darden. Like I think this is the place for me. And so um, I would say it was like a very organic finding of Darden, even though I was here at UVA, like, but Darden is very much, I would say, a little bit set apart from the undergrad campus or the undergrad grounds. And so it was a finding process.
Yeah, if you're spending all your time over on main grounds, Darden's on north grounds. I think there's some
Yeah.
work being done to try to connect the two a little bit more, but you're right. There's a physical separation that also sort of implies maybe even a mental separation a bit for folks. You're not encountering graduate business students on a regular basis. Why would you know about an MBA program if you're not actually going through an MBA program or you don't know a lot of people who've done an MBA program? Like there's a research element to this, and there's so much about the MBA experience. I think about this all the time. That's kind of like coded and kind of in groupy a little bit at times,
Yeah.
and it takes a while for people to learn about these things, and you got to have somebody to say it to you or mention it to you, and then maybe that's the spark that kind of lights things, or you happen to be around the school, and hey, maybe I'll do a little bit of research, maybe I'll look into that thing, and next thing you know, you like what you find, you get it even more interested.
Right. And I do agree with you, Brett. I think that within the UVA undergrad, like the McIntyre School, which is like the undergrad business, I didn't go. But I think they do have some Darden influence. And also the opposite side is that I do like that it's a little bit separated too, because if you're like a double who like me, you get to have a new experience. It's not like, oh, like I went here for undergrad and it's just a continuation. It very much it's a new experience. So I like that too.
Yeah, that's something I hear pretty regularly from double who's
Okay.
that come on the podcast for sure. And so many of our students come from, and certainly understand if you're in an undergrad like commerce program, you're probably thinking about an MBA. But so many of our students come from a lot of different backgrounds where an MBA wouldn't have been the first thing they thought about, when they graduated from college, or even as they were going through school and kind of thinking about potential next steps in grad school. It may be something that sort of, like to your point, organically kind of occurred to them, maybe through a conversation, a fortuitous interaction, just a visit somewhere, and running into somebody who's doing an MBA, like all kinds of ways for this idea to spark.
Agreed. Agreed. I think, and sometimes that's very special too. Like when like life throws you, like gives you an opportunity that you never saw coming, and then it like changes you as a person. I think that's very special.
So you come to Darden as a brand new first year student, graduate business school. Maybe the move was easy for you, right? You already in
Oh
town.
yeah. Yeah. I knew where I was going to live. That was good.
But what was the adjustment like to being a first year graduate business student at Darden?
Oh, it was brutal. um, I think a lot of times when we're like applying to business school, or I can just speak about myself. I was very much in the headspace of let me get into business school first, then I'm going to worry about whatever comes afterwards. I was very much like let me do the GMAT, let me like write these essays. I need to get through these interviews, um, and I hadn't really thought about what the on ground realities of being in this program would be like. And of course, Darden is very, very academically rigorous. You whether you have recruiting or you don't have recruiting, you're in class, for 3 classes a day, Monday through Thursday, and like you can't skip, you can't leave. Um, and I came from a non-traditional background, so I like had never studied commerce, never studied accounting, like finance, none of this. So coming in and being in a classroom with people who had already been consultants, people who had already like gotten their CPA, that was very much a challenge. And I remember coming into the case method, and I was like, I know I have to speak up, but I literally don't know if I have the confidence or if I'm going to be able to say something that is valuable in this classroom. And especially like when you come into the core, like I talked about how my section was really great and we had like this energy of camaraderie, but you don't know that the first week or day one. And so I think it's pretty scary like when you don't have the background to be like raise your hand in a classroom full of people who know more than you and still participate. And so I think that adjustment was a lot. And I like, I'll be the first to say that I had this perception that MBA students like just have fun. Like they're traveling all the time and like you don't really have to go to class. And like I was like, I'm gonna take 2 years to just work on myself. I'm just gonna have fun. I'm just gonna, do my thing. Cause like we talked about my job before had been very demanding. But that is not the case at Darden. Like Darden does shape you as a person, you work on yourself, but it is rigorous. And I think it's important, like for prospective students, to be thinking about, okay, what is it actually going to look like once I get into these programs? Not just like, let me get my foot in the door, but who am I once I get in and how am I going to make this work for me and succeed?
Yeah, I think it's an important point, right? Darden is known for being challenging, but it's not just work just for the sake of work, right? I think the thing that I have to always think about when it comes to that is if something's going to transform you as a person, it has to be challenging. It has to push you. And that is the goal with Darden's educational experience, is to transform students. So it's no small plans for sure.
No, and it does do it. I think it's very, very effective in terms of like it's throwing all this academic stuff at you, but it like teaches you and transforms you as a person, I would say. Like I think that after Darden, the business concepts that I've learned definitely change how I think about my life as well and how I approach life problems. So yeah, the transformation is very effective, very potent.
Um, you mentioned obviously you had not thought as much about what the experience was going to be like, so you were figuring it out. What resources were helpful to you as you were navigating all of that adjustment?
Absolutely. So I would say like the first resource that definitely comes to mind is your learning team. And like anyone who is like coming to business school with a non-traditional background, you kind of have to learn to leave your ego at the door and know that like, you're going to have people who are going to know more than you, but who are happy to share that with you and who are happy to kind of get you ready for class. So, but I don't know how much like the learning teams have been discussed, but essentially, okay, I assume maybe a lot. So you end up meeting with them like multiple times a week and going through the cases and for a particular week. And so you have people who come from accounting backgrounds, come from consulting backgrounds, or like even like other backgrounds, and they're able to help you in places where you may be weak. So I'd say that's the first resource. I didn't like particularly leverage like tutoring, but I know that is definitely out there as well. So if you find that like over the course of a particular quarter, you need a little bit more additional help, that's there. But for me personally, I would say like what helped me the most is the cases themselves. So maybe like people who come in with a more like traditional business background, they don't need to read the cases as closely. But if you come in with a non-traditional background, but you really give yourself the time to like read each case in depth, you actually learn a lot and you're able to participate at a very like comparable level in the classes, I would say, but you just have to put in more time. And then like I can't leave this episode without talking about the professors. I like I have been so impressed and floored by like the quality of professors, but also they're like top of their fields and like the smartest people you'll ever meet. But they're also incredibly, incredibly like down to earth and willing to meet with you. Like I had to go to my DA professor, my decision analysis professor. He's someone who the ed. He's someone who has been studying, he has a PhD in this stuff. He's been studying this for years. He taught at Yale. And I had to sit with him and have him me through how to do a pivot table, which is like very, very basic, very like foundational Excel. But he did it and he spent like hours on me, like throughout the quarter. And so I think like you really can't understate how like willing to sit with you professors are and how like invested in your success.
Yeah, I think you make a good point. I mean, everybody comes to business school with different learning curves. They're not all starting from the same place. And
Absolutely not. Yeah.
I think what's important, at least this has been kind of one of the themes that's come up in the conversations, is if you're new to accounting, you shouldn't be comparing yourself to the accountant in the room, the person who's done this for years, has a CPA, right? They're still going to be in your class. Nobody places out of classes here at Darden. And sort of be accepting of your own learning journey rather than fixating on other people's and where they are. That is really hard to do, though, when you're in a new environment.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I think Darden does a good job of setting you up to think that you're not exactly like competing with your peers. There's a curve and I'm not gonna argue that it definitely exists. And it feels impossible sometimes, but you're really here to learn from your peers as well. And that's stated over and over again throughout the quarters. And so I think if you come into business school with the mindset of like I'm going to learn from people who are different from me and carry that with me, and like that's something that benefits me over time, that really really helps. And like that's kind of the mindset that I didn't have coming in, but I had to develop over time, that like these are people I'm incredibly, incredibly grateful to because we're in the same quote unquote life stage. but they've seen a lot more and have all these experiences that they're like willing to share. And that's something that I can always carry with me. So I think that's like an important shift to kind of keep in mind.
But you had also seen and experienced things that they had not. Working in residence life, probably very different than somebody who had worked, let's say, in operations at a tech company or on Wall Street somewhere. Insert whatever industry you want. Like you had something to add to those conversations too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes the soft pieces of like being a leader or like managing different types of people, that's something that I can say was like really special that I came in with because not a lot of my peers had direct like management ability. And I will say that like not sure how other business schools are, but at like Darden, I don't think like leadership or the management of people is at all seen as like a soft or like unimportant concept. We have ethics and we have leading organizations and leading teams, and like they're all part of our core curriculum. And so I would say that for me, like I definitely went into specific cases and specific classes with like this is an area that I have a lot of experience in, and I kind of understand how people work and like how do we balance the needs of multiple groups of people, and like that's something I was able to bring into the classroom, but maybe not directly applicable in like finance classes necessarily. But you'd be surprised how much like the people aspect does end up being the clincher of a lot of cases, even in the more technical classes.
Sure, it's a social environment, right?
Oh
It's
yeah.
not just an Excel spreadsheet. There's people involved in all of this.
Business is people. Like it
Yes.
sounds like the most cliche thing I could say, but it's like a big, big takeaway. Like the people involved in a particular situation and more than the numbers, because the numbers are like they can all be fudged around. So yeah.
Well, it brings us kind of to a point to talk about the case method a little bit. I'm imagining that was a new learning style for you.
Yes. Yeah. So I think with the case method, it's painful in the beginning, but then like irreplaceable in terms of learning. Um, I think it was a source of anxiety for sure in the beginning. You want to read every case and you want to make sure that you're ready to handle every school cold call in the event that you do get called. And then most often you don't get cold called. So you're kind of like, oh, well, I did all this work and maybe I could have done something else. But then you're like actually learning in that process. And I think in terms of like how the case method has impacted me as a person. I think, we kind of talked about like coming in with a non-traditional background, but it really pushed me to build confidence and speak with confidence about things that I don't feel confident about. And I think that that is that's a valuable skill to have as a person, but also as a leader. So like I know that in corporate spaces, like if you say something haltingly or something that like women I think tend to do a lot is you say a sentence, but then you like end it in a question mark like that. And that's, something that you kind of learn not to do because professors don't like if you're talking about a case and you like end it in a question mark, like I think it's this. And you really, really shouldn't do that. So I think that's something that I've built a lot. And also I would say like after being in like a case method school and like specifically at Darden, I am not like a passive participant in any professional situation. So like if I go to, and this is with recruiting too, like I think the case method gets you ready for these networking circles and these recruiting situations. I will not go to like a reception or like a company briefing and not say something. Unless I'm like really, really like I don't think I can add anything to the conversation. Um, I like know how to make myself known and I know how to actively engage in a meeting or a briefing. And I think that is an invaluable skill that I will always, always carry with me. Like I hope that skill never atrophies even after I leave Darden, because like that's something that I'm really proud of having now.
I love that story. What you shared. I've heard that quite often, like sort of finding your voice and getting comfortable in that environment. Because the case method, I mean, you can't just say, "Oh, I'm just going to listen. I'm just going to observe."
Nope.
Like you can't opt out, right? You are choosing to be an active participant in your learning experience with all that entails. But that's where the growth is, right? Getting people more comfortable. And your point about like not ending a statement in a question. Like, like so that that resonates with conversations I've had here where students have said like sometimes in class they'll say, "Oh, you can be this or this," and the faculty would say, "No, you need to pick a position. What do you think it should be?" And even if you're wrong or it turns out it's sort of going on down the wrong path, that's fine. It will get corrected, but you have to stake out a position, advance the conversation, see what other people have to say. Um, that is powerful, I think, for people to realize like, yeah, I can speak up here. I have a point of view. Other people may have a different point of view, but I'm adding something to this conversation.
Yeah, I think it goes with dealing with uncertainty too. Like you're maybe never you're the smartest person in the room, or you're never the one who has all the information, but you kind of have to know how to deal with that uncertainty. And I think that's a big part of Darden is like how do we make decisions with incomplete information? And when you do that, like you're not gonna ever really know with 100% certainty, but you still have to explain it with some level of confidence because you need clients to trust you, you need your boss to trust you, you need your coworkers to have faith in you. And so yeah, really, really, really invaluable, like the ability, like you said, to articulate your point and stand by it.
Yeah, the other thing that I've heard from faculty is like it's not only just sort of hewing to your position and sort of maybe even doubling down, it's also being comfortable pivoting. Like, here's you said this earlier, you've heard new information. How do you pivot in a way that maintains your credibility with the audience? I think that's
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah, I definitely can't say that I've gotten the full skill there yet. It's really hard to not backtrack. If you realize midway that, oh, I like completely fumbled this, it's really hard to not be like, oh, okay, da 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 da. So yeah, that's an important point and something for me to keep in mind too. Like as I go into my next role, how do I not completely backtrack and lose legitimacy, but like still do say the right thing?
Well, these are not easy things that we're talking about here. I think to your point, like you've got a lot of opportunity to practice at Darden, right? You don't have to wonder when will I get a chance to practice these skills. It's happening on a daily basis as you're in class. I'm curious, you're now in your second year. Um, are there clubs and organizations that you've been involved with that have been important, impactful to your time here at Darden?
Yeah. So I think maybe I have a different answer than maybe other Darden students. So since I worked at UVA and I'd been in Charlottesville for a few years, I didn't necessarily like throw myself into the social scene once I got here because I kind of had like a community. That being said, my club experiences have been very valuable. I mean, I was part of finance club and golf club and Darden Disability Alliance, but and that was very valuable in the sense that like these are experiences I haven't had before and I'm able to connect with groups of people who I maybe like don't know a lot about. But I would say like beyond the club experiences where I've really found my people and where I found my relationships at Darden that I'll carry with me have actually been in the informal. So as you recruit, you end up recruiting with a group of people and sometimes you find someone really exceptional in there, someone who really like goes through difficult like times with you and, you know, watches you grow throughout the time of Darden. And so those people and people you end up sitting next to in class, like I think for me in section, you get assigned seats while you're in the core classes, Q1 to Q3. And so you end up sitting next to people who you maybe like wouldn't have necessarily normally gravitated towards. But then you like have conversations during breaks and you end up realizing like, oh, I really like enjoy the context that this person has to provide. And so those are kind of, I would say, the places where I've found the relationships. And I would also say that a lot of times at Darden, like people are very willing to host informal things. So like one of our classmates, Alberto, like he has like literally had every second year over at his house for dinner. He like cooks multiple times a week and has people over. I have one of my friends who organizes like girls' brunches. And so I think at Darden, there's this real culture of like informal things as well as formal things. And like you can kind of pick and choose where you fit and like where you're going to find your people.
I like that. We always talk
Yeah.
about these structured activities, but you're right. In the school environment, it's a lot of stuff that just sort of organically happens. It's, maybe not the neon party or this club organization. It's just getting together on a Wednesday night at a classmate's house for dinner or something like that.
Yeah. And I think I'm very introverted. I am not the most high energy person, so I'm like working on changing that. And so I think those one-on-one connections, like the small group stuff, where you like really get to like dig in and have a conversation is it's always pretty valuable to me.
So Megha, I'm curious, what are you looking forward to in the months ahead? I mean, here you are, you're entering your final semester of business school.
Yeah, very, very bittersweet. Like I can't believe that it's already been a year and a half. However, I am so excited for this next semester. I mean, first of all, I'm like excited to do the travel thing, finally do like the promised MBA experience travel thing. And beyond that, I'm just really, really excited to be in my classes and not have anything kind of in the back of my mind and just focus on the learning, which is so like, I think it's rare to have a time like that as an adult. And like now that I'm fully done recruiting, I can like just learn something and like not know how it's going to necessarily apply to my future career, but know that like some good inputs are going there and I'm learning under some excellent professors. So I would say that's what I'm most looking forward to. I also like this year was like finally the year that I regularly started going to golf clinics. And so I'm very excited to go every week for the rest of my last semester started, and kind of get better at that. So I would say that that's what I'm most excited for.
That sounds like a wonderful final semester. You mentioned doing some traveling. Are you doing a Darden Worldwide course, or is this just more personal travel?
Yeah, so I did do my DWC, my Darden Worldwide course, in October. I went to Ireland, and it was an incredible, incredible experience. I think it was like the thing that showed me that, oh, I just want to prioritize traveling for the rest of my Darden experience because that was like such a phenomenally executed experience. And it was very cold, but I think like going to the companies, getting the cultural exposure was, I mean now like that's all I want to prioritize.
Good time in Dublin and Cork, right, on that trip?
Um, Dublin and Galway, actually. Yeah. Have you been on DWC?
I have not been on a DWC. Tell us a little bit more about what you did on the DWC.
Yeah.
Just to help people understand this experience, because this is a very common question for people. It's, week long, it's a course, it's a credit bearing course. What does it look like from a student's perspective?
Yes. The best part is that you literally get credit to go travel and get immersed in a different culture, a different country. You get 1.5 credits. So it's like a full class. Um, but I think so. A little bit about like the worldwide course. So it is paid for by Batten, which is like the best thing. So I think it's 7,500 that Batten gives every Darden student to have a study abroad experience. So I'm just like, why wouldn't you? And that's kind of the mindset that I was in. And they always pick excellent, excellent locations, and so you really can't go wrong. I decided to go to Ireland because I actually haven't been to Europe at all, and so I thought this would be a really good entry point. And so, a little bit about what you do on a DWC. So, essentially, since it is a course, you're not just, traveling with your Darden buddies. You do have to go on company visits. But for me, those company visits were actually, I would say, like the most valuable part. So much so that I'm like, if they ever offer like a DWC like course to alumni, like I'm going every year. I'm going, because just the opportunity to go, like we went there and we met with like the Galway campus of Medtronic, which is like a huge medical devices company. And we visited Teeling Whiskey, and literally got to meet the CEO, the person, the entrepreneur who like literally made this amazing brand of whiskey. And so I think getting to hear from how business is done internationally is really, really valuable. So for me, like from my summer internship, I always just thought like, okay, like companies want to go to low cost locations. If they can find talent in a low cost location, that's what they're going to do. And so I went to Ireland and I was kind of like, why are all these big companies like Amazon, Google, like all these big companies are investing in Ireland? Like, what's happening here? Because Ireland is high cost, Ireland is expensive. Um, and it's hard to find housing, it's hard to find like real estate. And so, what's happening here? And so, to go there and get the context from these companies about like, about talent, about IP, these were things that like, my brain just like wasn't thinking about. And so, like, they always say like travel like opens up your mind and, and like opens your worldview. And for me, it definitely did that, but like from a corporate perspective as well. Like I'm more comfortable now thinking about like international business, and I'm going to like a global company, and I'll be working in the global finance team. So this was an invaluable experience for me. So yeah, that's a little bit about if you want to like dig into any of that.
Yeah, no, that's great. I appreciate your sharing that. I think it helps animate the experience. And these are not things that you could do as a tourist, showing up
No,
in Ireland.
no. I mean the connections and also the trip is just organized so well so that like you have no mental load. You're just there to learn and like generally engage with the culture as well as like a corporate um, opportunity.
Yeah, you mentioned the scholarship, the Batten Scholarship, that covers the course fee for the Darden Worldwide course for full-time MBA students. Of course, you still got to get yourself to and from the location. There are still expenses, but it does make the course much more accessible for students. And you see a lot of full-time MBA students doing these global electives now because of that support.
Yeah, I think it's more than worth it like for the kinds of experiences that you're able to have in that country. They put you in like a really nice hotel. You often get your own room. And so it's just a really, really nice experience. I highly recommend getting a credit card, get the points for the flight. It ends up working out. So I would say like for any prospective students, if you're like able to have this kind of immersion or international experience, for me, it's certainly been one of the highlights of my Darden experience.
Well, one more question for you, Megha, and I'll
Yeah.
see if there's anything else you want to cover, but I'm guessing this will probably be it here. So, uh, what's a piece of advice you would share with our prospective student listeners?
Yeah. So I was kind of thinking about this, and I think what's made the most difference for me and like what I really want to impart is that you have to have unshakable belief in yourself. And I think like it's kind of we make it funny like socially we're like, oh, you have to be delusional. Um, but you kind of do have to be because I like by all intents and purposes, like I am not someone who you would expect to see in an MBA classroom. I mean, I like work in student affairs, like not corporate at all. And for me to be sitting here, I think it's really believing in yourself. And like I'll share this too. Like I was on the wait list at Darden for a long time. And but I just like knew that I could do well here and I knew that I could do well in a corporate space. And so like really pushing for yourself, doing whatever you can do to get into the position you want to be in is very, very important. And I think not to be cliche, but like I genuinely believe it is like if you believe that you can do something, you can absolutely do it. You just like have to not waver and don't let what other people have going on or what even like people tell you about what you can or can't do hold you back. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I love that advice, and I appreciate your sharing your application journey to
Yeah.
Darden. We always tell folks waitlist is not a yes, but it's also not a no, and we always do
Yeah,
admit people into the class from the waiting list. So if Darden's a school of choice for someone, they find themselves on the waiting list. I mean, stay engaged, think about ways you can strengthen your candidacy, and you just never know what's going to happen.
exactly. Like it all works out one way or another. So yeah. And Brett, before we go, I do have a question for you.
Sure.
So I mean, we've talked a little bit, you've seen a lot of these interviews. So like what's your top piece of advice or like pieces of advice that have come up in a lot of different interviews that you think is like worth sharing?
I might give a couple. The first is about the adjustment to business school. And I already touched on it a little bit. I think you have to accept that your journey is different from others' journeys. And that's learning journey, that's your career journey. I think when you get into a new environment, graduate business school, Some people may know more than others, and it can be really easy to compare yourself to other people. And so being accepting of sort of what your journey looks like here at Darden and what your goals are and why those are your goals, and being willing to be confident in those things, I think is important. And give yourself some grace as you're going through what's really a challenging experience, right? It's not all going to be buttoned up and perfect. It's not designed to be that way, right? You're going to have to make some tough calls about what your biggest priority is in a given week. And sometimes that's school, and sometimes it might have to be career, and you have to lean on other people for the school stuff. I mean, it's going to be different from how you probably experienced undergrad, is my guess. The other thing I think is important is sort of and this is maybe a little bit more on the career side, is if you can, as you come into school, have a North Star, have a sense of where you'd like to go, um, but hold it loosely. Be open to things, catching your interest and maybe shifting you from your original plan. We talk with a lot of prospective students right now. It's good to have a plan A and a plan B, and to think in that sort of like, well, this is my ideal path, but what are other options that could also help put me on a trajectory that would be interesting to me, that would be something that I would want to do. I think that's important too. And we ask during the application process, tell us about your short-term and long-term career goals, and how does your MBA factor into those. But we also signal, at this time, how are you thinking about these things? And that's, at this time, is not a minor thing. It's our sort of small acknowledgement that this may continue to evolve, but things do move quickly when you get into MBA program. Recruitment starts pretty soon. Next thing you know, you're applying for internships. And so the sooner you can kind of make that decision and kind of know what you like to do, I think that North Star from a career standpoint is important, but also North Star from how you spend your time, your priorities, what's most important to you. What do you want to make sure you get out of this? And so this is where it connects back to the first piece of advice: being comfortable with what your priorities are, knowing that they may be different from someone else's, I think is really important, and being accepting of that. Because being clear about your priorities will help you figure out how you're going to spend your time when you have so many things competing for it.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, Brett. I think the recruiting journey is often and like very unexpected. So just being willing to roll with the punches, I think, is wonderful.
Well, Megha, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. I so enjoyed this conversation, and best of luck in your final semester, and enjoy your holiday break.
Thank you, Brett. You too, and thank you for having me.
And that was my conversation with Megha Kalyan, a second-year student in our full-time MBA class of 2026. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at Darden, DARDEN, @virginia.edu. Till next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.